You know, I have a lot of friends that have been harmed by this. I'm just going to give a couple of examples. I know for me, it always weighed on me, and that passage by Joseph Smith always, long before I left the church, I always liked that, because to me, that's the true spirit of the church. But it's not what it is. You know, I went down the street when I live in Vegas, and I went down the street, and I walked in the door of a taco shop right down the street, and when I went in there, there was an old friend of mine. He was just sitting there, and he was by himself, and he was getting a taco. He already had his taco, and I said, "How you been?" And I'm not going to give his name, but he said, "Not so good." And I said, "Well, let me get a taco, and let's talk about this." You know, and so I did, and we sat down, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Brian, I've been on a faith crisis, and I just don't know what to believe anymore." This is a faithful man. He's a really good Latter-day Saint. He checked all the boxes. You don't get much better of a man, both in the church and outside of the church, a very moral man. And on this faith crisis, he didn't know what to believe. He didn't even know if there was a God anymore, because his shelf broke. And in that conversation, he told me that he had been suicidal for over a year because of this faith crisis he was in. This isn't healthy. You've got to give more people room. People are putting things on shelves. You know, they find something, a little example. They find out that the Book of Mormon was translated out of a hat and with a rock, and not the golden plates with the seer stone. This is something we've been taught our entire life. I have. There's images, there's pictures, the back, that he translated the Book of Mormon off of golden plates. And now, recently, you're finding out it's out of a hat. What does a person do with that? For some people, they don't navigate that very well. So if they find out, well, if that wasn't exactly true, then what else isn't exactly true? And they start to search. And I know you've called these guys lazy learners, President Nelson, but they're really not. They went and they search, and they try to find the truth, and they find more things that don't line up. And it starts to throw them that shelf, and they keep putting things on their shelf. It's a place where you're just avoiding the topic. You throw it on, that's what the shelf is. It's a place where you put your doubts and your what you don't know what to do with. Then you find another item, you put it on your shelf, you don't know what to do with it. And if you do anything with it, if you go and ask a question of a local leader or anywhere in the church, you're going to be ostracized for simply asking questions. You're going to be put in danger of not being faithful. You're going to lose fellowship. So you keep putting more things on the shelf, and you might even lose your job, especially here in Utah, where this is such ingrained your employment is. And you keep putting things on the shelf, and you put another doubt on the shelf. You say you've been instructed to doubt your doubts, so you put it on the shelf. And you got the next item, doubt your doubts, put that on the shelf. But there comes a point for all of these, what you call lazy learners, where that shelf breaks. And I got to tell you, these people are not looking for a path out of the church. They're really not. They want to believe. They want to not have these doubts, because they still love their heritage. They love their culture. There is some good things in the church. There's a baby there. A lot of me still loves the church. I really do. But they know there's a turd there too that we need to remove. But now, their whole worldview is dumped on its head. Their whole worldview is dumped on its head. And President Nelson, I don't know if you realize just how painful that is. You've maybe never experienced that. But I'm asking you to change the culture to have a little more charity towards our family in the Mormon community. Just because you've had doubts or maybe even left, they're still part of the Mormon community. All my cousins are Latter-day Saint. Most of my best friends are. I'm still part of that community. Just because you've left doesn't mean you're not still in that community. I'm asking you to have a little more charity towards these people and set a culture to not ostracize, but to love. This is what Jesus taught, is to love. But these people have their shelf broken, and not only is their worldview damaged, many of these who experience this go back to not even knowing if there's a God anymore. That's a painful journey, a terribly painful journey. But on top of that harm is now they're in danger of a divorce. Their wife or their husband will threaten to divorce them. Their children will disown them. Their friends will ostracize them. They might even lose their job. So now you're adding a second layer of harm to these people who are having a faith crisis. And trust me, you don't go looking for a faith crisis because it's terribly painful to go through one. Nobody wants to go through a faith crisis. It's horrible. Not something they want. So now, because they're simply following their conscience, you're endangering their family. I thought families were together forever, and the church is supposed to support families. What you're doing with your rigid ideology is preventing families from being together. Which takes me to another friend. He went through a faith crisis. He was struggling. And his wife didn't accept his faith crisis. His wife was going to divorce him. So now, this is a real friend of mine. He was dumped on his head and trying to figure it out. And on top of that, his wife was threatening to divorce him. And this friend of mine ended his own life because of that faith crisis. This is unacceptable. President Nelson, you've got to make it a much more welcoming exit for the church. You have to give a place of conscience in the church. I understand we can't go to the pulpit and share all our views and off the charts, but you can offer a place for people to explore their doubts without shame, without coercement, without harm. People are being harmed to the point of suicide over this topic. I know because I lost a friend to it already. I've had another one talking suicide over two of my friends. I go to all my other buddies, active Mormon, because I tell you, most of my buddies are active Mormon. I'd say at least half of them are having issues of conscience. They have some doubts, and they got a big old shelf with things sitting on it, and they're afraid of their wife's going to divorce them if they ask any further. This is a coercive situation and a very harmful situation, President Nelson. You're hurting people. You got to do better. While I was been sitting out here for a week, I've been fasting, and you had one of the 12 did come by a couple of times, and